The envelope arrived on a Thursday. No return address. No stamp. Just her name, Jasmine Cole, written in a handwriting she didn't recognize. She stared at it like it might explode if she touched it. Her fingers shook as she picked it up. The paper was too heavy, too quiet. And somehow she already knew, whatever was inside wasn't meant to be found. Still, she opened it. Inside, a single photograph. Face down. And a folded note. 6 words. Tell him the truth, or I will. Her world stopped. Because whoever sent that letter knew everything. The secret she'd buried, the lie she'd built her new life on, the one truth that could destroy him. And as the door to her office opened behind her, and she heard his voice, low, calm, unguarded, she realized the nightmare had already begun. Because Declan Hayes wasn't supposed to know. Not yet. Hello, family. Welcome back to Mr. Harrington's Stories. May your week be blessed with truth and second chances, because we all need them, don't we? If you're here right now, listening to this story unfold, I want you to type present in the comments. Type it if you believe the past always finds its way home. Type it if you've ever tried to bury something, only to have it dig its way back up when you least expected it. And listen, if you believe in facing your fears instead of running from them, hit that subscribe button. Because here's what I've learned after all these stories, after all these lives I've shared with you, running never works. It might buy you time. It might give you distance. But it never, ever sets you free. Trust me on that. 3 months earlier, the boardroom was on fire. Not literally, but it might as well have been. 20 executives screaming over each other. Fists slamming on mahogany. Voices rising until the sound became one continuous roar of rage and panic and blame. The company was hemorrhaging money. Millions. Every day. And no one, not one person in that room, knew how to stop the bleeding. At the head of the table sat Declan Hayes. 35 years old. Self-made billionaire. The man who'd built this empire from nothing. And right now, watching his board turn on him like wolves, he looked like a king watching his kingdom burn. His face was stone. His jaw set. His hands folded on the table in front of him with a control that was almost painful to watch. But his eyes, those steel-gray eyes that had stared down competitors and closed billion-dollar deals without flinching, they told a different story. They looked tired. Tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with betrayal. Because the people screaming at him right now, they were supposed to be on his side. This is your fault, Hayes. You pushed too fast. You ignored the data. You bet everything on a product that's failing. We're losing investor confidence. The stock is tanking. You need to step down. That last one landed like a punch. Declan's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly. But he didn't speak. Didn't defend himself. Didn't even blink. Because what could he say? The numbers didn't lie. And the board had already made up their minds. They wanted him out. In the corner of the room, barely visible behind a stack of presentation folders and a laptop she was supposed to be taking notes on, sat Jasmine Cole. 28 years old. Black. Beautiful in a quiet, understated way that most people never noticed. She wore a blazer 2 sizes too big and her hair pulled back so tight it made her temples ache. She'd learned a long time ago that invisible was safer than seen. She was a temp. 3 months, decent pay, 0 expectations. She wasn't supposed to speak. Wasn't supposed to have opinions. Wasn't even supposed to be noticed. But she'd been listening. And somewhere between the accusations and the panic and the complete meltdown happening in front of her, she'd realized something. They were all wrong. Every single one of them. The product wasn't failing because of bad design or poor timing or Declan's so-called arrogance. It was failing because they were marketing it to the wrong demographic. The data they kept screaming about? It was being interpreted backward. The solution wasn't to pull back. It was to pivot. Simple. Obvious. And apparently invisible to 20 executives too busy protecting their own positions to see it. Jasmine felt her heart start to race. Her palms went damp. She told herself to stay quiet. To keep her head down. To let them destroy each other and collect her paycheck and go home. But then Declan Hayes looked up. And for just a second, just one fraction of a moment, his eyes landed on her. He didn't say anything. Didn't ask for her input. Didn't even acknowledge she was there. But something in his expression cracked. Just barely. Like he was drowning and didn't even have the energy to reach for the surface anymore. And Jasmine, who'd spent 3 years making herself invisible, who'd sworn she'd never put herself out there again, who knew better than anyone what happened when you spoke up in a room full of powerful people who didn't want to hear you. She stood up. The room didn't notice at first. They were too busy shouting. But then one executive trailed off mid-sentence. Then another. Then another. Until the entire boardroom went silent. And 20 pairs of eyes turned to stare at the temp in the corner, who just committed professional suicide. Jasmine's legs felt like water. Her throat felt like sandpaper. But she'd already stood up. She'd already drawn their attention. There was no going back now. So she took a breath. And she said 6 words. "You're solving the wrong problem entirely." The silence that followed was deafening. Someone laughed. A sharp, disbelieving sound. Someone else muttered something under their breath. A few executives exchanged looks that clearly said, "Who the hell is she?" But Declan Hayes didn't laugh. He leaned forward. Slowly. His eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. "Explain," he said. His voice was quiet. But it cut through the room like a blade. And so she did. Jasmine explained the pivot. The demographic shift. The data they'd been reading wrong. She kept her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. Kept her words simple even though her mind was racing. And somewhere in the middle of it, somewhere between pointing out their mistakes and offering a solution they should have seen 3 months ago, she forgot to be afraid. She forgot she was a temp. Forgot she was invisible. Forgot everything except the truth she'd been sitting on for weeks while watching them drive this company into the ground. When she finished, the silence was different. Heavier. Thoughtful. One executive pulled out his phone. Started running numbers. Another leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowed, clearly recalculating everything she thought she knew. And Declan Hayes, he didn't take his eyes off Jasmine for a single second. Within an hour, the crisis had dissolved. The board didn't apologize. They didn't thank her. They didn't even ask her name. But the vote to remove Declan? It never happened. And when the meeting finally ended and everyone filed out, back to their offices, their stock portfolios, their carefully maintained reputations, Jasmine gathered her laptop with shaking hands and told herself it didn't matter. She'd done her job. She'd survive. And in 3 months, she'd be gone anyway. But as she headed for the door, she felt it. That gaze. Still on her. She didn't turn around. Didn't acknowledge it. Just kept walking. Because men like Declan Hayes didn't remember people like her. And that was exactly how she needed it to stay. Jasmine's apartment was small. Not cozy. Not charming. Just small. One bedroom with walls so thin she could hear her neighbor's television through the plaster. A kitchen the size of a closet. A bathroom where the hot water only lasted 7 minutes if she was lucky. But it was hers. Or at least, it was hers as long as she could make rent. Which, lately, was becoming more of a question than a guarantee. She dropped her bag by the door and kicked off her shoes. Her feet ached. Her head pounded. And somewhere deep in her chest, there was a knot of anxiety that had been there so long she'd almost stopped noticing it. Almost. Her younger sister, Maya, was curled up on the couch with a textbook open in her lap. 19. Smart as hell. And depending entirely on Jasmine to keep her in school. How was work? Maya asked without looking up. Fine, Jasmine said. She didn't mention the boardroom. Didn't mention standing up in front of 20 executives and nearly getting herself fired. Didn't mention the way Declan Hayes had looked at her like she'd just saved his life. Because none of that mattered. What mattered was the rent check she needed to write tomorrow. The groceries she needed to buy. The textbooks Maya needed for next semester. Crying didn't pay bills. And hope? Hope was a luxury Jasmine couldn't afford. She made herself a cup of tea and stood at the window, staring out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Declan Hayes was probably in some penthouse, celebrating the fact that he'd survived another board meeting. Probably didn't give her a second thought. And that was fine. That was exactly what she needed. Because the last time someone saw her, really saw her, it had cost her everything. But that night, alone in her tiny apartment with the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders, Jasmine couldn't stop replaying that moment in the boardroom. The way the room had gone silent. The way he'd leaned forward. The way he'd said, "Explain." Like her words mattered. Like she mattered. And for just a second, just one dangerous, foolish second, Jasmine let herself wonder what it would feel like to be seen like that again. Then she finished her tea, went to bed, and reminded herself that wondering was how people got hurt. Declan Hayes didn't sleep that night. He sat in his penthouse, glass walls overlooking the city, furniture that cost more than most people's cars, silence so thick it felt suffocating, and replayed the boardroom meeting over and over in his mind. Not the parts where his board had torn into him. Not the vote that almost ended his career. Just her. The woman in the corner who'd stood up and saved him with 6 words. He didn't know her name. Hadn't thought to ask. She was a temp, probably. Someone filling in. Someone who'd be gone in a few weeks. But he couldn't stop thinking about her. The way she'd stood there, shaking but steady. The way she'd cut through all the noise and politics and fear and just told the truth. No agenda. No game. Just clarity. Declan had built his empire on reading people. On knowing who wanted something from him, who was lying, who was loyal, and who was just waiting for him to fall. But her? He couldn't read her at all. And that terrified him almost as much as it fascinated him. He told himself it was professional. Gratitude. Respect for someone who'd saved his company. But late that night, staring out at the city with a glass of whiskey he wasn't drinking, Declan admitted something to himself. I don't need anyone. I never have. So why can't I stop thinking about her? The next morning, Declan extended her contract. Then he moved her desk to his floor. Then he started finding excuses to walk past her office. To ask her opinion on things he already knew the answer to. To stay late when she stayed late. He told himself it was strategy. She was smart. Valuable. Worth keeping around. But deep down, he knew the truth. He wanted to understand her. And more than that, he wanted her to look at him the way she had in that boardroom. Like he was worth saving. 3 weeks after the boardroom incident, Jasmine was still trying to figure out what was happening. Her contract had been extended. Her desk had been moved. And Declan Hayes, the man who barely spoke to anyone below executive level, kept showing up. At first, it was subtle. A question about a report. A request for her opinion on a presentation. Small things. But then the small things started happening more often. And the questions started feeling less like business and more like conversation. Jasmine didn't know what to do with it. She told herself to stay professional. To keep her distance. To remember that men like him didn't really see women like her. They saw usefulness. Convenience. A momentary distraction. But late one night, when she was the last one in the office again, and Declan walked in with 2 coffees and set one on her desk without a word, she felt something crack inside her. How did you know? He asked quietly. Know what? In the boardroom. How did you see what no one else saw? Jasmine looked up at him. He was leaning against her doorframe, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, looking nothing like the untouchable CEO and everything like a man who was just tired. I just saw what everyone else was too afraid to see, she said. It was the truth. But it was also a deflection. Because the real answer, the one she'd never say out loud, was that she knew what it felt like to be dismissed. To have the right answer and no voice. To watch people destroy something good because they were too proud to listen. She knew because she'd lived it. Declan stepped closer. Just one step. But it changed everything. The air between them felt heavier. Warmer. Like the space itself was holding its breath. You're not like anyone I've ever met, he said. And the way he said it, quiet, honest, almost confused, made Jasmine's heart stutter. She should have smiled. Should have deflected again. Should have made some joke about being a temp and gone back to her work. But instead, she stood up. And suddenly they were too close. Close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. The weight he carried. The cracks in his armor that he hid from everyone else. Close enough that when he leaned in, just slightly, just enough to test the distance, she felt her breath catch. But then she stepped back. Because she'd been here before. Had let someone see her. Had let herself hope. And it had destroyed her. I should finish this, she said, gesturing vaguely at her computer. Her voice was steady. Professional. Like her heart wasn't racing. Like she hadn't just felt something dangerous and inevitable and impossibly foolish start to take root. Declan didn't push. Just nodded. Stepped back. But as he left, he paused in the doorway. "Jasmine?" She looked up. "Thank you," he said. "For that day in the boardroom. I never said it. But thank you." And then he was gone. Jasmine sank back into her chair, hands shaking, and realized with a sinking certainty. This wasn't going to end well. Because the last time someone saw her, really saw her, she'd lost everything. And Declan Hayes was starting to see her far too clearly. Victoria Cross had keys to Declan's penthouse. She also had his social security number, access to his private calendar, and enough information about his business dealings to bury him if she wanted to. Not that she would. Victoria wasn't vengeful. She was practical. And right now, the most practical thing to do was remind Declan exactly who belonged in his world. Spoiler, it wasn't some temp from the 43rd floor. Victoria was 33. Blonde. Polished to a lethal shine. She wore Chanel-like armor and smiled like she had secrets you'd never figure out. She and Declan had been engaged once. That was over now, technically. But Victoria had never been good at letting go. Especially not when someone else tried to take what was hers. She'd heard about the boardroom incident. Heard about the temp who'd saved Declan's company. Heard about the extended contract and the desk on his floor and the late nights. And she decided it was time to pay a visit. Jasmine was leaving the office late, again, when Victoria stepped out of the elevator. The hallway was empty. Quiet. Just the hum of the building's ventilation and the distant sound of traffic 43 floors below. Victoria smiled. It was the kind of smile that looked warm until you looked closer. Until you saw the way it didn't reach her eyes. "You must be Jasmine," she said. Her voice was silk. Smooth. Expensive. Jasmine stopped. She didn't know this woman. But she recognized the type. Recognized the way she carried herself. The way she looked at Jasmine like she was already calculating her worth and coming up short. "I am," Jasmine said carefully. "Can I help you?" Victoria tilted her head. Studied Jasmine like she was a painting in a gallery. Interesting. But not worth the price. "I'm Victoria. Declan's fiancée." Ex-fiancée, Jasmine thought. But she didn't say it. Victoria stepped closer. Not threatening. Just invasive. The kind of closeness that felt like a test. "I wanted to meet you," Victoria said. "The woman everyone's been talking about. The one who saved the day." Jasmine didn't respond. Just waited. Because she knew where this was going. "You think he sees you?" Victoria asked. Her voice dropped lower. More intimate. Like they were sharing a secret. "You're a novelty, sweetheart. Smart. Unexpected. I get it. But novelties don't last." She let that sit for a moment. Let it sink in. Declan has a type. And you're not it. Jasmine's jaw tightened. But she didn't flinch. Didn't look away. Didn't give Victoria the satisfaction. "Is that all?" she asked calmly. Victoria's smile widened. But her eyes went cold. "Just thought you should know," she said. "Before you get any ideas." And then she walked away. Heels clicking on marble. Confidence radiating off her like heat. Jasmine stood there for a long moment after Victoria disappeared into the elevator. Her hands weren't shaking. Her face was calm. Professional. But later, alone in her apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, her hands started to tremble. Because what if Victoria was right? What if she was just a novelty? A momentary distraction for a man who lived in a world she'd never belonged to? What if the way he looked at her wasn't real at all? Jasmine closed her eyes and told herself it didn't matter. That she wasn't falling for Declan Hayes. That she didn't care what Victoria thought. That in a few months, she'd be gone anyway. But deep down, in that part of her she'd tried so hard to bury, she knew. It was already too late. She was already falling. And the landing was going to hurt. Think about it, family. Really think about it. If someone from your past, someone who hurt you, someone who knew all your weaknesses, if they tried to sabotage your future, what would you do? Would you fight back? Stand your ground and refuse to let them win? Or would you walk away? Protect yourself. Choose peace over pride. Because here's the thing, sometimes walking away looks like weakness. But sometimes, it's the bravest thing you can do. And sometimes fighting back isn't about winning. It's about refusing to disappear. So let me know in the comments. What would you do? Because Jasmine? She's about to have to make that choice. And whatever she decides, it's going to change everything. The emergency meeting was called at 7 in the morning. No warning. No agenda. Just a text that landed on Declan's phone at 5:30 a.m. with 3 words, "Get here now." By the time he arrived, the boardroom was already full. Executives in suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Lawyers with briefcases and expressions that promised nothing good. And at the head of the table, the board chairman, a man who'd helped Declan build this company and who now looked at him like he was a stranger. "Someone's been leaking company secrets," the chairman said without preamble. "Proprietary information. Client lists. Financial projections. It's all been sold to our competitors." The room went cold. "How much?" Declan asked. His voice was steady, but his hands, hidden beneath the table, were clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. 40 million in lost contracts so far. Maybe more once word spreads that we can't be trusted. 40 million. The number hung in the air like smoke. Suffocating. Inescapable. "Who?" Declan asked. The chairman hesitated. And in that hesitation, Declan saw it. The doubt. The suspicion. The question none of them wanted to ask out loud. They thought it might be him. "We're investigating," the chairman said carefully. "But Declan, you need to understand, if we can't find the source, if we can't prove this wasn't an inside job from the top." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Declan's empire, everything he'd built from nothing, every ruthless deal and sleepless night and sacrifice, it was all on the line. And his own board didn't trust him. After the meeting, Declan didn't go to his office. He went to Jasmine's. She was already there. Early, like always. Coffee steaming on her desk. Hair pulled back. Focused on her screen with that quiet intensity he'd come to recognize. When he walked in, she looked up. And whatever she saw in his face made her stand immediately. What happened? He told her. All of it. The leak. The millions. The suspicion in the chairman's eyes. And when he finished, when the weight of it all settled between them like lead, he said something he'd never said to anyone in his entire career. "I need your help." Jasmine's breath caught. Because she knew what he was really saying. "I trust you." And God help her, that trust felt heavier than anything she'd ever carried. "Of course," she said quietly. "Whatever you need." But even as the words left her mouth, guilt twisted in her stomach like a knife. Because she had secrets too. Secrets that could destroy him just as thoroughly as any leak. And if he ever found out. She pushed the thought away. Focused on the problem in front of her. The one she could actually solve. They spent the next 3 days buried in data. Server logs. Access records. Email trails. Jasmine worked 16-hour days, surviving on coffee and adrenaline, tracing every digital fingerprint she could find. Declan was always there. Right beside her. Sometimes working. Sometimes just there. Like he needed to be near someone he could trust. Late one night, when the city outside had gone dark and the office felt like the only place left in the world, Declan leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Jasmine looked up from her laptop. "Doing what?" "Helping me. You don't owe me anything. You could walk away right now and no one would blame you." She wanted to say something simple. Something professional. "It's my job. You extended my contract." But the words that came out were different. "Because you listened to me when no one else did." The honesty in her voice surprised even her. Declan's eyes softened. And for a moment, the exhaustion and fear and pressure all seemed to fall away. "Everyone I've ever trusted has left," he said quietly. "Or used me. Built their careers on my work and then walked away the second things got hard. But you." He trailed off. Shook his head. "You didn't ask for anything," he finished. "You just helped." Jasmine's throat tightened. Because she wanted to tell him the truth right then. Wanted to say that she did want something. That she'd started caring about him in ways that terrified her. That every late night, every shared coffee, every moment he looked at her like she mattered, it was breaking down walls she'd spent 3 years building. But she couldn't. Because the truth would ruin everything. So instead, she just said, "We'll figure this out." And Declan nodded. Believed her. And Jasmine hated herself a little more. Victoria Cross had always been good at getting what she wanted. And what she wanted was Declan Hayes. Not because she loved him. Love was messy. Complicated. Love was what foolish people did when they confused chemistry with compatibility. No, Victoria wanted Declan because he was hers. Because they made sense together. Because powerful people belonged with other powerful people. And some temp from nowhere wasn't going to change that. So Victoria made a call. The private investigator she hired was discreet. Expensive. The kind of person who could find anything on anyone if you paid them enough. And within 48 hours, he found exactly what Victoria needed. Jasmine Cole's past. The scandal at her previous job. The relationship with her supervisor that had ended in public accusations. She'd been innocent. The investigator's report made that clear. But innocence didn't matter when the headlines had already been written. Young employee accused of sleeping her way to promotions. Company distances itself. Career destroyed. Victoria read the file twice. Smiled. And then she picked up the phone. Jasmine was leaving work when Victoria appeared. Again. This time, she wasn't smiling. She was holding a folder. Plain manila. But the way she held it, like it was a weapon, made Jasmine's blood run cold. "We need to talk," Victoria said. She didn't wait for an answer. Just walked to the empty conference room and held the door open. Expectant. In control. Jasmine followed. Because what choice did she have? Victoria set the folder on the table between them. Didn't open it. Didn't need to. "I know who you are," she said simply. "I know what happened. And I know you've been lying to Declan about it." Jasmine's heart stopped. "I didn't lie," she said carefully. "I just didn't." "Didn't tell him?" Victoria's laugh was sharp. Cold. "That's the same thing, sweetheart." She tapped the folder. "One call. That's all it takes. One call to the board, and they'll know you've been hiding a scandal. They'll assume you're the leak." "And Declan?" Victoria leaned forward. "He'll never forgive you." The words landed like blows. Because Victoria was right. Declan had trusted her. Let her into his world. Let her help him when he was at his most vulnerable. And if he found out she'd been hiding something this big, it wouldn't matter that she was innocent. It wouldn't matter that the accusations had been false. All that would matter was the lie. "So here's what's going to happen," Victoria continued smoothly. "You're going to resign. Quietly. No drama. No explanation. You'll just disappear. And I'll forget I ever saw this file." She paused. "You have 48 hours. Jasmine felt numb. Frozen. Like the walls were closing in and she couldn't breathe. "And if I don't?" She managed. Victoria's smile returned. Slow. Cruel. "Then I ruin you both." The gala was 3 days later. Black tie. 500 guests. The kind of event where $1 million donations were made over champagne and canapes. Declan had asked Jasmine to come with him. Not as his assistant. As his guest. She should have said no. Should have used Victoria's threat as an excuse to start pulling away. To protect herself before this got any worse. But when he'd asked, standing in her office with that look in his eyes that was starting to feel dangerously close to hope, she couldn't. She just couldn't. So she said yes. And now, standing in a borrowed dress that Maya had insisted she wear, surrounded by people who lived in a world she'd never belonged to, Jasmine felt like she was drowning. The ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers. Marble floors. Women in gowns that cost more than Jasmine's yearly rent. Men in tuxedos discussing stocks and acquisitions like they were talking about the weather. Declan stayed close to her. Introduced her to investors. Board members. People whose names she'd only seen in business magazines. And every time someone asked who she was, he said the same thing. "This is Jasmine. She's brilliant. Not she works for me. Not she's my assistant. Just she's brilliant." And every time he said it, something in Jasmine's chest cracked a little more. Because she was falling in love with him. And it was going to destroy her. Victoria found them near the champagne fountain. Of course she did. "Declan, darling," she said, voice warm and familiar. "It's been too long." She kissed his cheek. Ignored Jasmine completely for a beat. Then turned to her with that practiced smile. "And this must be Jasmine. I've heard so much about you." The way she said it, friendly on the surface, poison underneath, made Jasmine's skin crawl. Declan's jaw tightened. "Victoria, this isn't—" "Oh, I'm just saying hello," Victoria interrupted smoothly. "Though I have to admit, I was surprised to hear you'd brought someone new. Especially someone with such an interesting background." The words hung in the air. A few heads turned. A few conversations paused. Jasmine felt her face go pale. "No. Not here. Not now." "What are you talking about?" Declan asked. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it now. Victoria's smile widened. "Oh, you didn't tell him? About your last job? About why you left?" More people were listening now. Whispers starting to spread like wildfire. Jasmine wanted to run. Wanted to disappear. Wanted to be anywhere but here. But her feet wouldn't move. Victoria continued, her voice carrying just far enough. "I just think it's fascinating how some people reinvent themselves, don't you? New city. New name. New chance to. That's enough." Declan's voice cut through the room like ice. Everyone went quiet. He stepped forward, put himself between Jasmine and Victoria. And when he spoke again, his voice was low but clear enough that everyone nearby could hear. "Her past doesn't define her," he said. "But your cruelty? That defines you perfectly." Victoria's smile faltered. Declan turned to the crowd. To the investors and board members and society elite who were watching with hungry eyes. "Jasmine Cole saved this company," he said. "When every single person in that boardroom was ready to tear it apart, she found the solution. And if any of you have a problem with her being here, with me, then you know where the door is." The silence that followed was deafening. And then slowly, people turned away. Went back to their conversations. Pretended they hadn't just witnessed Victoria Cross get publicly dismantled. Victoria's face went white. Then red. Then she turned on her heel and walked away. Declan turned back to Jasmine. His eyes were searching. Worried. "Are you okay?" Jasmine couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't process what had just happened. He defended her. In front of everyone. Without hesitation. And she'd never felt more guilty in her entire life. Because he didn't know the whole truth. And when he found out. "Let's get some air," Declan said softly. He led her out to a balcony overlooking the city. The night air was cool. Quiet. A relief after the suffocating noise inside. "I'm sorry," Jasmine said finally. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I should have told you. About my past. About why I—" "Stop," Declan said gently. "You don't owe me explanations. Not unless you want to give them." "But I do owe you that," Jasmine said. "After everything you've done for me." He turned to face her fully. And the look in his eyes made her forget how to breathe. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "But if you want to tell me, I'll listen. And whatever it is, it won't change the way I see you." Jasmine's eyes burned. Because she wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that the truth wouldn't ruin this. But she knew better. She'd lived this before. So instead of telling him, she just said, "Thank you. For what you said in there." Declan's expression softened. "Always." And standing there on that balcony with the city glittering below them and the weight of her secrets pressing down on her chest, Jasmine made a decision. She was going to tell him. Not tonight. But soon. Before Victoria did it for her. Before this secret destroyed them both. The investigation into the leak hit a breakthrough 2 days after the gala. Jasmine found it buried in the server logs. A pattern. Access times that didn't match anyone's schedule. Downloads that happened when the office was empty. And the IP address traced back to one place. Her computer. Jasmine stared at the screen, her blood turning to ice. No. She hadn't leaked anything. Hadn't even seen half these files. But the evidence was right there. Undeniable. Damning. Someone had used her credentials. Her access. Her computer. Someone had framed her. She felt sick. Her hands shook as she pulled up more logs, more data, trying to find proof that she was innocent. But every file she opened just made it worse. Jasmine? She looked up. Declan was standing in her doorway. And the expression on his face. He knew. The board called an emergency meeting, he said quietly. They found the same thing you just did. His voice was steady. But there was something underneath it. Something that sounded like heartbreak. I didn't do this, Jasmine said. Her voice cracked. I swear, Declan, I didn't. I know, he said. Those two words broke her. Because he believed her. Even when the evidence said otherwise. Even when his entire board would be demanding her head. He believed her. But it didn't matter. Because the board didn't. The meeting was brutal. They laid out the evidence. The access logs. The downloads. The timeline that pointed directly at Jasmine. And then they gave Declan an ultimatum. Fire her now, or we vote you out. Today. The room went silent. Jasmine sat in the corner, frozen. She couldn't look at Declan. Couldn't watch him make this choice. Because she knew what he had to do. His company. His life's work. Everything he'd sacrificed for. He couldn't lose it all for her. The chairman spoke again, voice hard. We need an answer, Declan. Declan looked at Jasmine. Just once. And in that look, she saw everything. The trust. The regret. The impossible choice. She stood up. It's okay, she said quietly. I'll go. No. Declan's voice was firm. Final. He turned to the board. She stays. The room erupted. You can't be serious. The evidence is clear. You're throwing away everything for a woman who... Declan didn't raise his voice. Didn't argue. Just said one more thing. If you want me out, vote me out. But I'm not firing her for something she didn't do. The chairman stared at him. Disbelief written across his face. Then you give us no choice. The vote was swift. Unanimous. Declan Hayes was removed as CEO. Effective immediately. But even as the room cleared, even as his empire crumbled around him, Declan didn't look at them. He looked at Jasmine. And he didn't look like a man who'd just lost everything. He looked like a man who'd finally found something worth keeping. Later, the truth came out. The real leak wasn't Jasmine at all. It was the CFO, Gregory Marks. A man Declan had trusted for 7 years. A man who'd been at every board meeting, every strategy session, every private conversation. He'd been working with Victoria. She'd wanted Declan back. And when he'd refused, when he'd started pulling away from her and toward Jasmine, she decided to remove the obstacle. Frame Jasmine. Force Declan to choose. And when he chose wrong, when he chose Jasmine over his company, destroy them both. It was elegant. Ruthless. And it almost worked. But Jasmine had left one thread. One tiny digital fingerprint buried so deep in the code that it took the forensic team 3 days to find it. Proof that someone else had used her credentials. Proof that the files had been accessed remotely. Proof that Gregory Marks had sold company secrets and pinned it all on her. When the board saw it, the fallout was immediate. Gregory was arrested. Victoria's involvement was exposed. And the board, humiliated, guilty, desperate to make it right, begged Declan to come back. But Declan didn't answer right away. Because standing in his empty office, watching the city stretch out below him, he realized something. He'd spent his entire life building an empire. Sacrificing everything for success. For power. For control. And in one moment, he'd been willing to lose it all. For her. And he didn't regret it. Not even a little. Think about it. Really think about it. If choosing love meant losing everything you'd built, your career, your reputation, your empire, would you do it? Would you choose the person who saw you? Who believed in you? Who stood by you even when the world was burning down? Or would you choose safety? Choose the empire? Choose the life you'd worked so hard to build? Because here's the truth. Most people would choose safety. And there's no judgment in that. Empires aren't built on luck. They're built on sacrifice. And sometimes, Protecting what you've built is the right choice. But sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let it all burn. And trust that what's left, what's real, will be enough to build something better. So tell me, what would you do? Drop your answer in the comments. Because I want to know. Would you choose love? Or would you choose the empire? The boardroom had never felt this cold. Jasmine sat in the corner, exactly where she'd sat that first day 3 months ago. The day she'd stood up and spoken 6 words that changed everything. But today, she wasn't standing. She was frozen. Silent. Watching the man who'd believed in her lose everything because of her. The board had laid out their ultimatum with surgical precision. Fire Jasmine Cole immediately, or we vote you out. Today. Right now. No negotiation. No discussion. Just a choice. And Declan Hayes, the man who'd built this empire from nothing, who'd clawed his way up from poverty to become one of the most powerful CEOs in the country, he didn't even hesitate. She stays, he said. His voice was quiet. Steady. Final. The room erupted. You can't be serious. The evidence is damning. You're destroying everything for someone who betrayed you. But Declan didn't argue. Didn't defend himself. Just stood there with his hands in his pockets and that look on his face. The one that said his mind was made up and nothing they said would change it. The chairman stood. His face was hard. Disappointed. Then you leave us no choice. The vote was swift. Clinical. Like cutting out a tumor. All in favor of removing Declan Hayes as CEO. Every hand went up. Effective immediately. And just like that, it was over. Declan walked out of the boardroom without looking back. Past the executives who'd just voted him out. Past the assistants who'd worked for him. Past the office that had his name on the door. And Jasmine followed him. Because she couldn't not follow him. When they reached his office, former office, he finally stopped. Turned to face her. And the look in his eyes made her chest crack open. He didn't look angry. Didn't look bitter. He looked free. You didn't have to do that, Jasmine whispered. Her voice was thick with tears she was barely holding back. You didn't have to lose everything for me. Declan stepped closer. Close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his face. The weight he'd been carrying for so long finally lifting. Yes, I did, he said simply. And the certainty in those 3 words broke her. Because he meant it. He'd chosen her. Over his empire. Over his reputation. Over everything he'd spent his entire life building. And she didn't know how to survive the weight of that. I built this company from nothing, Declan said quietly. His eyes never left hers. I can do it again. But you? He paused. And when he spoke again, his voice was raw. You're irreplaceable. Jasmine's tears finally spilled over. And for the first time in 3 years, since the day her world had fallen apart and she'd learned that being seen was dangerous, she let herself be held. Declan wrapped his arms around her. And she let herself break. Because maybe, just maybe, breaking in front of someone who wouldn't leave was the first step to healing. But even as she stood there in his arms, even as she felt safer than she had in years, a voice in the back of her mind whispered the truth. He'd lost everything for her. And he still didn't know her biggest secret. The next 3 days were chaos. Declan's removal sent shockwaves through the business world. Headlines screamed betrayal. Stock prices dropped. Investors panicked. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Jasmine and Declan started digging. Because the evidence against her had been too perfect. Too clean. Someone had gone to great lengths to make her look guilty. Which meant someone had something to hide. They worked out of Declan's penthouse. Laptops spread across the dining room table. Coffee cups accumulating like artifacts. Neither of them sleeping. Both of them driven by the same desperate need. Find the truth. Clear her name. And make whoever did this pay. Jasmine traced the digital fingerprints. The access logs. The timestamps. And slowly, painfully slowly, a pattern emerged. The downloads hadn't come from her computer. They'd been routed through it. Bounced off her credentials like a mirror. And the original source? It traced back to one person. Gregory Marks. The CFO. Declan stared at the screen. His face went pale. Then red. Then something cold and dangerous that Jasmine had never seen before. 7 years, he said quietly. I trusted him for 7 years. Jasmine's hands were shaking as she pulled up more evidence. Emails between Gregory and an offshore account. Financial trails showing payments. Metadata proving he'd accessed files he had no business touching. And then she found the final piece. Text messages between Gregory and Victoria. Dozens of them. Planning. Coordinating. Framing Jasmine. Destroying Declan's trust. Forcing him to choose between his company and the woman who threatened Victoria's control over him. It was all there. Every detail. Every manipulation. Every lie. Declan read the messages in silence. His jaw tightened with each one. And when he finally looked up, his eyes were storm gray and furious. We're going to the board, he said. Today. The emergency board meeting was nothing like the last one. This time, Declan wasn't the one on trial. He walked in with Jasmine at his side. With evidence printed and bound and irrefutable. With recordings and financial statements and digital trails that painted a picture so damning that even the most skeptical board member couldn't deny it. Gregory Marks had been selling company secrets for 6 months. He'd used Jasmine's credentials to cover his tracks. And he'd been working with Victoria Cross to destroy Declan, because Victoria wanted him back, and Jasmine was in the way. The room went silent as Declan laid it all out. And then, slowly, terribly, it all fell apart. Gregory tried to deny it. Tried to spin it. Tried to claim the evidence was fabricated. But Jasmine had been thorough. Every claim he made, she dismantled with data. With proof. With a kind of quiet competence that left no room for doubt. And when the board chairman finally turned to Gregory with disgust written across his face, it was over. Security, he said simply. Gregory was escorted out. Hands in cuffs. Face red. Shouting about lawyers and defamation and conspiracy. But no one was listening. Because the truth had finally won. Victoria's involvement came to light 2 hours later. The board's lawyers pulled the text messages. Traced the offshore accounts. Connected every dot. And when they called her in for questioning, she came. Polished. Confident. Ready to spin this into something she could survive. But Declan was there. And when she walked into that room and saw him sitting at the table, with Jasmine beside him, with the evidence spread out in front of him, with that look on his face that said he finally saw her for what she really was, Victoria's confidence cracked. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? Declan asked quietly. Victoria lifted her chin. Tried to smile. Tried to make it seem like this was all some misunderstanding. But her hands were shaking. You always underestimated me, Declan continued. Thought I needed you. Thought I'd come running back if you just removed the right obstacles. He stood. Leaned forward. But the truth is, Victoria, I never needed you. I just hadn't figured out what I actually wanted yet. He glanced at Jasmine. And the warmth in that look, the certainty, it said everything. Victoria's face went white. Then red. Then she did what powerful people always do when they've been caught. She threatened. You'll regret this. Both of you. I have connections. Influence. I'll make sure. The chairman cut her off. You're done, he said simply. Your firm will be notified. Your reputation is finished. And if you come near this company, or these people, again, we'll press charges. Victoria stared at him. At all of them. At the empire she tried to control crumbling in front of her. And then, for the first time in her perfectly curated life, she had nothing left to say. She walked out of that boardroom in silence. And Declan didn't watch her go. He was too busy looking at Jasmine. The board begged him to come back. Literally begged. We made a mistake. We should have trusted you. Please, Declan. The company needs you. But Declan didn't answer right away. Instead, he asked to speak to Jasmine. Alone. They ended up in his old office. The one with his name still on the door. The one that felt like a ghost of a life he'd already left behind. They want me back, he said. I heard. Jasmine's voice was quiet. She was standing by the window, looking out at the city. Not at him. You should take it, she said. You earned it. This is your company. Your life's work. Declan stepped closer. There's a condition, he said. Jasmine turned, and the look on his face made her stomach drop. They want me back. But they want you gone. The words landed like stones. They'll never accept you, Declan continued quietly. After everything that happened, after the scandal, true or not, they see you as a liability. They want me to return alone. Bring in a new team. Rebuild my reputation without complications. Complications. That's what she was. A complication. Jasmine swallowed hard. Nodded. Tried to keep her voice steady. Then take it, she said. I'll be fine. I've been fine before. I'll stop. Declan's voice was firm. He crossed the room. Stood directly in front of her. And when he spoke again, his voice was softer but no less certain. I'm not going back, he said. Jasmine's breath caught. What? I didn't build this company to be controlled by cowards, Declan said. I didn't spend years fighting for something real just to compromise the moment it got hard. He reached for her hand. Held it gently. We do this together, he said. Or not at all. Tears burned in Jasmine's eyes. But you'll lose everything. I already lost everything, Declan interrupted. The second they made me choose. And you know what I realized? He smiled. And it was the first real smile she'd seen from him in days. Losing the company didn't feel like losing everything. It felt like freedom. Jasmine shook her head. You're not thinking clearly. You're angry. You'll regret. I won't, Declan said simply. Because I'm not doing this out of anger or spite or pride. I'm doing this because I finally figured out what matters. He stepped closer. Close enough that she could see the certainty in his eyes. And it's you. Jasmine's walls, those carefully constructed walls she'd spent 3 years building, they finally, completely crumbled. But there's something you need to know, she whispered. Something I should have told you from the beginning. And then, standing in that empty office with the city stretched out below them, Jasmine told him everything. About her last job. The relationship with her supervisor that had been professional until it wasn't. The way he'd promised her promotions, opportunities, a future, and then turned on her the second she'd ended things. The false accusations. The public humiliation. The headlines that destroyed her career before it even started. The way she'd been innocent but no one cared. Because the story was too good. The optics were too damaging. And it was easier to let her go than to fight for the truth. I changed my name, she said. Moved cities. Started over. And I swore I'd never let myself be seen like that again. Never let anyone have that kind of power over me. Her voice cracked. But then you looked at me in that boardroom. And I started hoping again. And I was so afraid. That I'd see you the way they did, Declan finished quietly. Jasmine nodded. Tears streaming down her face now. I thought if you knew, you'd think I was broken. Unworthy. That you'd look at me and see the scandal instead of me. Declan was quiet for a long moment. And then he cupped her face in his hands. Gently. Like she was something precious. I see you exactly as you are, he said. Strong. Brilliant. Brave enough to start over when the world tried to destroy you. And that's not broken, Jasmine. That's surviving. His voice dropped lower. More intense. And that's why I can't let you go. Jasmine broke. Completely. And for the first time in 3 years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, being seen wasn't dangerous after all. Maybe it was the point. 6 months later. The office was smaller than Declan's old one. But it was brighter. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Modern furniture. Clean lines. Everything about it felt new. Fresh. Like possibility. Hayes and Cole Consulting. That's what they'd named it. Not Hayes Enterprises. Not some solo venture where Declan rebuilt his empire alone. Hayes and Cole. Partners. Equals. Building something better. The first few months had been brutal. Long hours. Uncertain income. No safety net. Just two people with a vision and the audacity to believe they could make it work. But they had. Slowly. Carefully. Honestly. They'd built a company that prioritized truth over profit. That valued people over power. That refused to compromise integrity for growth. And it was working. Clients came. At first because of Declan's name. But they stayed because of the work. Because of the results. Because Hayes and Cole delivered. And somewhere in the middle of building this new life, Jasmine stopped hiding. She stopped wearing blazers 2 sizes too big. Stopped pulling her hair back so tight it hurt. Stopped making herself invisible. Because she didn't need to anymore. She was safe. The board meeting was at 10. Jasmine walked in first. Confident. Prepared. The way she always was now. She laid out the quarterly report. The growth projections. The client testimonials. And as she spoke, Declan sat at the head of the table and listened. Really listened. The way he had that very first day in the boardroom. When she finished, the room was silent. And then one of the investors, a woman who'd been skeptical at first, who doubted that this partnership would last, leaned forward. "Impressive," she said. "You've built something remarkable here." Jasmine smiled. "We've built something remarkable." The investor's gaze shifted to Declan, then back to Jasmine. "And I think you're just getting started." After the meeting, after the investors left and the office went quiet, Jasmine found Declan standing by the window. The same way she'd stood 6 months ago. Looking out at the city. Thinking. She walked up beside him. Didn't say anything. Just stood there. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked finally. Declan turned to look at her. And the answer was already in his eyes. "Not once," he said. He reached for her hand. Laced his fingers through hers. "You fixed my crisis with 1 sentence," he said quietly. "But I think you saved me long before that. You just showed me what actually mattered." Jasmine's throat tightened. "You saved me too," she whispered. And standing there in their office with both their names on the door, Jasmine realized something. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't hiding. She was building. With someone who saw her. Who chose her. Who'd proven over and over that she was worth more than any empire. And maybe that was the real power move. Not holding on to what you built at all costs. But knowing when to let it go. For something real. Because empires crumble. But love rebuilds. Let me ask you something, family. What would you have done? If you were Declan, standing in that boardroom, being told to choose between the empire you built and the person who saw the real you, what would you have chosen? Would you have taken your position back? Rebuilt alone? Told yourself that love isn't worth losing everything? Or would you have walked away? Chosen the person who believed in you when no one else did? Started over with nothing but hope and trust? Because here's the thing, there's no wrong answer. Some people need the empire. Need the security. Need to know they didn't sacrifice everything for nothing. And that's okay. But some people realize that the empire was never the goal. It was just the shield. The armor. The thing they built to protect themselves from being hurt. And when they finally find someone who makes them feel safe without the armor, they let it go. So tell me, what would you have done? Return to power alone? Or start over with the person who believed in you? Drop your answer in the comments. Let's talk about it. Because maybe your answer will help someone else figure out theirs. And maybe, just maybe, that's why we tell these stories in the first place. To remind each other that we're not alone in these impossible choices. That love is always a risk. But sometimes, it's the only risk worth taking. She fixed his crisis with 1 sentence. But he saved her with 3 words. I choose you.